Okay, guys, we got Kurt Wuckert Jr. on today. Good morning, good morning. It's a great day, and I wanted a couple of things, Kurt, just ideas that I had to cover here today, and questions for you to kind of premise the audience, and that is the convergence of AI and potentially in blockchain for
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, and the opportunity before us, and also the potential risk of not controlling the AI with
Mm.
blockchain. Uh, Also, prior to that, I want to ask you about the Satoshi-era coins moving. There's one with iceberg potentially on it on the thing, and the
Yep.
80,000 BTC that moved. And then also before, in the beginning, I want to try to just ask take us back in history as to what happened with the whole Sybil attacks and the
Sure.
early days. So, how you been, man? Good to see you.
I'm good. I'm good. It's summertime. July is always really rough. We got three birthdays in the household here in July, so it's always party, 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 and then it's just busy season right now because we've got all this stuff going on with Teranode development, and Gorilla Pool is pretty closely involved in all the testing. So every time there's a new release, it's essentially us and Tal that can give any feedback. So it's all right, fire it up and this and that and pressure test and all this stuff. So we have a lot going on top of the fact that just because it's summer, I want to be like, yeah, it's 3 o'clock. Let's go to the pool. And then my kids are like, hey, it's my birthday. What are we doing? And I'm like, well, I'm working 60 hours a week right now. But you're right. Let's go do something fun. So I'm stretched a little thin, but I'm pumped and happy to be doing what we're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time today because it's definitely your role is super key and important in this whole ecosystem and in your knowledge and your experience. So I appreciate it, and we really value you big time, man. So
Thanks, brother.
all right, so you're welcome. Back to the early days. There was I know your story. You heard about Bitcoin in 2012 when somebody gave it to you in I think it was a payment for the ad business that you were
Yep.
in, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so. But after that, you really went down the rabbit hole. And what happened with the Bilderberg Group and Gavin Andreessen and the whole Sybil attacks? I mean, can you just kind of take us back in time a little bit? Because
Yeah.
a lot of people right now in this AI space are realizing that like a decentralized ledger is the
Mhm.
solution and a massive scalable one. But they're just like, too bad one doesn't exist. That's their point.
Sure.
And so, let's go back in time and find out why they believe it doesn't exist.
Sure. So I got to start with a little bit of a preface. I wrote recently about how there's essentially a revolving door that makes its way between big tech, like all your sort of Silicon Valley tech companies, your Austin tech companies, all these companies that are kind of developing things in ad tech, med tech, biotech, social media, and all the data aggregation, all this stuff. Well, all of those things have like a strategic value to things like big government. And big government can be as simple as, hey, this is a politically expedient thing for me to be involved in, or it can be as insidious as rogue CIA agents trying to leverage, tech out of somebody like 23andMe and say, okay, let's, if we can get this data from you guys and we're either willing to pay you for it or threaten you for it, and then we're going to do nefarious thing with it that I don't need to go into those details. So then you have big gov, and then you have big banks, which are kind of at the center of everything. And then big banks sort of coalesce into these venture capital firms and all these things. And then you can start to see how all of these things could be connected. So you have government telling central bank, okay, we need this much money. Central bank puts that money out into your commercial banks, and those commercial banks will send money into places like Sequoia Capital or BlackRock or wherever else. And then you get all these big funds and stuff are just funds of funds, and they're just investing in each other. And so if you look at the portfolio of, pick any of your top 100 funds in the world, and they're all just kind of invested in each other as like a pretty big portion of their own investments. And so there's this weird interconnected revolving door thing between big tech, big banks, big government. Now, because of that, anything that happens in any of those spaces, if it's disruptive at all, or if it's even just a little bit intriguing, so let's say the Air Force discovers something about like, man, I don't know, if we make our pilots do this one thing, their cholesterol goes up in this measurable way. And so, oh, interesting. Well, that data could be relevant to this biotech firm over here. Let's have them do R&D about why this might be happening. And then biotech firm then gets an Air Force contract, and they start working back and forth, and that it becomes this super nepotistic mishmash of money and power and opportunity and all these things. And then when the Air Force admiral retires from the Air Force, he gets a board seat over at biotech company or over at investment firm that invests in biotech company. And so let's think about what Bitcoin is in the whole scheme of these things. Like Bitcoin uses the SHA-256 algorithm, which was created by the NSA, uses elliptic curve technology that was also largely developed by the NSA. It's based on peer-to-peer networking technology, which might have been developed by people working on the dark web and stuff for file sharing and some of these other things. But it might have also been developed by intelligence agencies who needed a relay system in order to do clandestine communications. This is where we get things like Tor, the Onion router, and some of these other things. And so you've got all these technologies that the people who are the most capable would either be working in a big tech firm, or they'd be working for intelligence agencies, or maybe they'd be working for a big bank as like a security engineer or something like that. And so all these people are kind of that nobody has zero conflict of interest in the entire Bitcoin economy, because all the people that have the skill set to create or utilize or run these things, especially in the early days, these are the kind of people who are gray hat at best, meaning they have a day job, they pay taxes, they probably do something very reasonable for some baseline amount of income, but because of their skill set, they're also super valuable to all kinds of other players, perhaps to the CIA, perhaps to Mossad, perhaps to whoever the highest bidder is. And for somebody who's just immoral or amoral, and if China starts saying, "Hey man, for 10 million bucks, I'd really like you to do this," a lot of guys are, they don't care. It's like, "Hey man, I don't like China, but I do like 10 million bucks," and that kind of turns into the whole conversation.
Well, who was
and so yeah.
And I'm sorry to interject. I want to just stop you right there for a moment. Who was, and kind of along those points, now that you laid the foundation, that's kind of like, it sounds like you've laid the foundation for what could potentially happen. Now, I want to ask you about who was Vladimir, the guy Vladimir who, and then that, as it rolled into the Blockstream, and Blockstream couldn't raise any money. Nobody wanted to invest. Like, how do you guys even, so if you could kind of lay the foundation for that.
If you take, his name is Vladimir Vanderlon. He has an interesting backstory. The main thing, so if you just know his top line story, he was a researcher at MIT, which, for anybody that knows anything about MIT is a think tank test bed for big tech and intelligence, so big government. So if you're going to jump into, hey, we need to run an experiment on something like Neuralink kind of technology and that kind of stuff, you'd really want to be talking to MIT people that have done some of this predicate background research in this kind of high level tech. Now, the reason you do that is MIT has some of the smartest people in the history of the world that learned there, graduated there, and then are now working on R&D there. Vladimir is one of those people. He worked at the Digital Currency Initiative in the Digital Media Lab, I believe is like subset over at MIT. But super mysterious character. We do not know a lot of his background. We know that he's Dutch. His last name is Vanderlon. But other than his very basic background of like where he's from, I think there's only probably one picture of him on the internet anywhere. It's kind of a blurry black and like gray scale picture of Vladimir Vanderlon. And he's the number one for a long time anyway. I think he's finally been supplanted, but for like 12 years of Bitcoin's history, he was the number one code contributor into Bitcoin. But just this mysterious fellow. And, the cypherpunk ethos goes two directions on this. They'll say, oh, well, that's good. He's not at risk for being attacked or controlled in some way. You don't know where he is. You don't know what he looks like. He's this perfect character to keep Bitcoin secure, right? How do you leverage somebody you can't find? But at the same time, the flip side of that is, how do you know if somebody that you don't know his face or his reputation or where he is, or if he even actually exists at all as a human being? Maybe he's some conglomerate character like some people assume Satoshi Nakamoto is. Well, how would you know that if he's been compromised? How do you know if the contributor named Vladimir Vanderlon is the same guy in 2012 as it was in 2014 or 18 or 20. I think he ultimately stepped down from his role in 2021, if I recall. But for a very long time, he was this key contributor. Now, there were two other people at MIT that were under employment at that time, and it was Gavin Andresen, who we know worked with the CIA at least a little bit in regards to Bitcoin. That's public information. And Corey Fields. Corey Fields is another major contributor to Bitcoin Core. Now, none of those guys are Blockstreamers officially. Like, they did not join the company structure of Blockstream, but partially they didn't have a reason to. And the reason they didn't have to is they were being paid for under a grant that came from the MIT Digital Currency Initiative, which was raising money from various donors. And one of them who we know they were raising money with was Jeffrey Epstein. Because Joi Ito, I believe his full name is Joi Ito. He's a Japanese venture capitalist from a company called Digital Garage, and he laundered some amount of money. I don't remember the figure, but it was to the tune. It was over $1 million from Jeffrey Epstein into the Digital Media Lab, and it was allocated into the Bitcoin development project that the university was hosting. And so, as many of us also know about Jeffrey Epstein, he also had very close ties to big banks, big tech, and big government vis-a-vis the intelligence community. And so, what does all that mean, right? And I don't want to make direct assertions and say Vladimir is definitely a malicious actor, but there's a lot of ingredients there that give a lot of incentive for him to be a malicious actor. Especially, in my opinion, the small blocker ethos and the social engineering that went into the sort of small blocks forever narrative is itself part of the Sybil attack, which I'll be happy to go into. But so I would argue that he is likely a compromised character, and that his contributions were largely negative. I mean, they've been a net negative for Bitcoin being useful for anything except for something useful to big banks, big tech, and big government, which is really the only people who have adopted the technology, and they've only adopted it as a sort of reserve asset or something to invest in, like essentially a financial instrument.
So we know that Gavin Andresen was a well-loved and respected character in the history of Bitcoin. I mean, Satoshi
Yep.
had passed him the keys to the war chest, right? So, but you're saying he also was working at MIT or from MIT, maybe even from the same background as the other guy, Vladimir.
Similar.
So what happened there with Andresen? Because I mean, Satoshi retired in 2011 and passed everything over to Gavin Andresen.
Gavin it was the obvious choice for a couple of reasons. But I think he was also the worst choice for one major reason that I'll go into at the end. But Gavin was not only a nice guy, but a reliable guy, also super experienced. He was a commercial code expert. He was a cryptography expert. He really understood, the why and how about Bitcoin. And he fundamentally agreed with Satoshi Nakamoto about the future, essentially. Like, here's how things should be implemented. And so he was very much a protege of Satoshi Nakamoto. The only other guy that it could have been was Mike Hearn. And I think Mike Hearn could have been passed these keys, but Mike Hearn really liked to spar with people. Like, Mike Hearn's kind of a tough guy, and he was always like, hey man, I'm going to fight you back. I'm going to call you a jackass. I'm going to call you a liar. I will just say it how it is. But it made him a little more controversial. Whereas Gavin was quite a bit more of an emissary about things. He was very calm and collected. I think Gavin's big mistake, I think the worst thing that ever happened in Bitcoin, possibly, was Gavin distributing his own power almost immediately after receiving it. Is he received the keys to the repo, making him the sole person that could add code to the Bitcoin repo, and he decided to give that power and split it among 5 other people. And that was really, I mean, it was like all of those people ended up stabbing him in the back about 3 years later, and ultimately kicking him out of the project because he was the only person who was ultimately a big blocker and working on his own implementation of Bitcoin that had, if I recall, a 2 or a 6 megabyte block size limit. I forget now. But everybody else was a small blocker, and a good bit of them were also involved in Blockstream. And, everybody's values changed, and Gavin got himself edged out pretty quickly. It's really unfortunate because I think Gavin, to this day, I think he's a good person. Um, really soft spoken, classy guy, but he's a little bit he's very soft. He has a very soft demeanor, and he's not ready. If five people are going to bully him in a project that he cares about, like I just don't think he has the gumption to push back in a way that's effective. And so that was kind of the unfortunate demise of Gavin. And I think it's no small part of the story that he was kicked out the week that he came out and said that Craig Wright is Satoshi Nakamoto. He's sufficiently proven it to me, both via two signatures on two laptops, both that I verified, but also the fact that we had these private conversations that really only Satoshi Nakamoto could have had with me, because they were talking one-on-one in person about things that Gavin and Satoshi had only spoken about in private in the past. And so that was Gavin's primary verification that Craig Wright was Satoshi Nakamoto. And as soon as he came out with that, he was persona non grata, and then you're out of the project, Gavin. Good luck. Don't call.
I mean, that's yeah. I mean, I remember, he also testified about that into the Kleiman case as well to back it up,
Yep.
even though he got attacked. So,
Yeah.
so back to that era when he's getting his keys revoked. That would have been 2016. So,
Yep. 15-16 era.
15,
Yep.
16. So then 15, 16. So Blockstream came onto the scene around that time, and they weren't getting any sort of funding, right? So they had no, I guess they were having a hard time raising capital. And then all of a sudden they got a big influx of capital.
Yes. They were pushing around a pitch deck for about a year, starting in 2014. I recall a couple of people who worked in venture capital, and they knew me as like the Bitcoin guy in that era. I was the only guy that they knew who knew anything about Bitcoin, and I remember them asking me, "Hey, what do you think of this company?" Never heard of them, and then they kind of explained to me what was in the deck. If I don't remember if anybody actually showed me the deck or not. It's been a long time, but and I've seen so many things about Blockstream now that I can't remember if I have now imagined what it would look like or if I actually saw it at this point. But I remember them explaining to me what their business model was, and it was like professional Bitcoin development. Like, it's just like there's no business model, there's no profit motive. How could this be monetized ever? Like, it just seemed insane to me, and it seemed insane to the people that were showing it to me too, which is why they brought it to me to say, "Hey, is there something we're missing?" And I basically agreed, like, "No, man, I can't see how any of this actually turns into money for Blockstream. It just didn't make any sense." And then all of a sudden, yeah, they had I believe it was the lead investor in their first round was in 2015. It was the biggest insurance company in Europe. It's called AXA, AXA. They insure everybody. They insure everybody's cars and houses and businesses. They're a massive company, and they have a venture arm. And then, and it comes to me, I'm like, why would a European insurance company be investing in this no-win situation, Bitcoin developer professionalization project? Like, why would they care about Bitcoin? Because that's the only reason I could see to do such a thing, is if you were like a very wealthy person who's super excited about the history or about the future of Bitcoin, and like maybe this is just your like, "Hey, I hope this takes off because this is cool." That's the only thing that I can imagine, like, why you would invest in such a company in that era. But the curious thing is that the CEO of AXA at the time was a guy named Henri de Castries, and he was a French entrepreneur and had worked in the industry, big finance guy essentially. Which, for anybody that understands, at CEO level in Europe, you're talking about cousins of dukes and those kind of things get into these kind of roles. So again, kind of an old world nepotism thing. And he also happened to be the president of the Bilderberg Group, which, for anybody that doesn't pay attention to, never listen to Art Bell, Coast to Coast Radio, or George Norrie, or maybe even Alex Jones, the Bilderberg Group is sort of like a guild of one percenters. So if you're in the most rich or most powerful 1% of a given industry in the world, you can be invited to be a member of Bilderberg. So if you're the CEO of a Fortune 100 company, or if you're the president of a major nation, or if you're some kind of royal family, but a big shot, you can't just be somebody's, you can't be the nephew of some duke. You need to be like, "Hey, I'm third in line to be the king of Belgium or something. And so these are like, we're talking very, very powerful, very, very rich, or very, very influential. This also includes media CEOs and some of these things. They hold a once-a-year meeting where they kind of discuss the direction of the world. And the thing that is most curious about them is that none of their meetings, none in the history of Bilderberg, which is more than a 100-year-old organization, have ever allowed a single piece of media, a single media person in to take notes or report from. Nothing inside. The conversations that happen inside are completely done in secret. And part of the conversation is if anything that happens inside the Bilderberg meeting leaks out, whoever leaked it is banned for life. And so we're talking about, I don't even know, control of probably $20 trillion in global wealth, and the kind of people that can, send tanks into most of the countries in the world, having a giant secret meeting with people that are supposed to be their enemies. But, so there's all these things that, like, conspiracy theorists are like instantly like, oh man, like the all-seeing eye is glowing hard here. But so it's curious. Why then would the president of that organization, so we're not just a member, but the president of Bilderberg, is the first guy to invest in a company like Blockstream, which claims to be, hey, we're professional Bitcoin developers. But truly, what I recall about the pitch deck conversation is that they were essentially offering themselves as saying, look, we're the guys with the real influence over this network. We're the software devs. Whatever we say is the thing that gets voted on to become the direction of Bitcoin going forward. So investing in us is a little bit like investing in control of Bitcoin. Now, they didn't say it in exactly those terms. It was heavily implied. And I just don't see a way around it. Now, looking 10 years into the future from how things developed, well, what do they do? Well, they deeply hijacked and controlled Bitcoin. They've made it not disruptive to payments, not disruptive to banking, not disruptive to anything in big tech that it could be. It is only this reserve asset for companies like BlackRock or MIT's favorite Michael Saylor, or some of like this strategic Bitcoin reserves and all these things. It's a TradFi asset. It's digital gold. It's just going to sit there. If you do nothing, you will get rich by doing nothing. I think that's the key thing that they push. Is, it's a little bit like hey, trust the plan, but don't worry, you're going to be taken care of. It's always big brother government. Like, don't think too hard, don't work too hard, trust us, pay your taxes, and we're going to make sure you're A-okay. And that's what I think is the real subversion. Bitcoin is the most powerful tool in the history of the world for freeing people's minds and their wealth and their ability to do business with anybody else on earth. And they have shoved it into a box that gets controlled by Larry Fink. And it is just an incalculable tragedy, in my opinion.
Wow. Well, that is definitely some of the saddest news ever, in the way of, I guess if that was the end of the story, then we might as well just end it here, but it's not. It's not the end. So because of some people, Bitcoin, the protocol did not die. It was supposed to die, right? That was the goal, and that was the purpose, and that has to where the Sybil attacks that you talked about. In their mind, they wanted to kill the Bitcoin protocol, keep the name, okay, and continue the Bitcoin name to build it into the future, and let all the boomers and other, the degen say, look, you get to be a part of this cool technology, Bitcoin.
Yep. You're a rebel.
And so I want to ask you about the Sybil attacks, but I got to ask you as well about how, okay, maybe first Sybil attacks, then I want to ask you something else. So yeah.
Yep. So first, for anybody that's not aware, a Sybil attack is essentially a social engineering attack similar to, let's talk about a basic grift. So let's imagine you're at a gas station, lady walks up to you, she looks like a cripple, she says, oh, I'm hungry. I'm just a hungry old lady. Can you please? I just need $5. I'm gonna go right over there and buy myself a sandwich and whatever else. And you give her money and you feel bad for her.
Everyone's fallen for that. I've done that too.
Everybody there's nothing wrong, in my opinion. No. Like I like to give $5 to those people, right? But to some people, it's a business opportunity, and they are grifting everybody, and they're making $50 an hour and whatever else. Now, again, it's not a lot of harm done in those situations. It's more sad and irritating, but it's not overtly evil in my opinion. But that's your basic premise is you're lying in order to get something out of people. Now, in the digital realm, what a Sybil attack is you're essentially taking nodes that are operating in this way. So, in a basic cybersecurity like Sybil attack situation, you would be setting up a situation where people think they are participating in one thing, but in fact they're participating in another. And that other thing is stealing your data, stealing your passwords, maybe stealing your Bitcoin or whatever else. They're usually interrelated with things like spear phishing attacks or other types of attacks based on like open source intelligence and some of these things, and they're trying to rob you. But you can also do a Sybil attack on things like a big one. If you recall the 2016 elections, there were these huge accusations that all online Trump supporters were Russian bots. Everything was a Russian bot happening in the 2016 presidential election. Now, there probably were some Russian bots that were participating in the thing because they have a vested interest in what the United States does, but it was not all Russian bots. But it's twofold. The Russian bots would be an example of a Sybil attack, pretending to be in America. Hey, I love this country, man, red, white, and blue, like vote for Trump and whatever. That would be a Sybil attack. But also the people saying that all Trump supporters are Russian bots, that's also a Sybil attack. Both are dishonest. Both are telling a story that is not exactly true, but in order to influence other people into believing another thing and pushing things in a direction. So in Bitcoin, you see this in a few different ways. Today, you see it with your kind of laser eye, cat profiles, or the people that just kind of show up and, under every post by Anthony Pompliano or any of these other influencers, all these people like, yeah, man, I'm going to hold forever. It's hodl, hodl, hodl. It's going to go to $1 million by 2026 or, whatever. And you see a lot of those kind of random attacks, but the more insidious one really started during the Bitcoin Civil War. There were discussions about whether the block size limit should be raised, what should it be raised to? And then also underlying that is what should the governance of Bitcoin be at scale? Should it be pure proof of work and everybody gets to have a vote if you have hash power? Should there be a vote at all? Should the protocol be set in stone? Or, hey, should there be this development path of Bitcoin that it's always evolving and ultimately, the smartest people in the room should make these proposals for the best way to make Bitcoin better all the time? And, those are all opinions that can be debated on their own merit. But because so many members of the community were fundamentally anonymous, you don't know who they are, you could make the case, and many people have made the case, that most of the advocates who had anonymous accounts were run by somebody like Greg Maxwell. All right. I like to use Greg as he is the perennial, every character whose face I can't see and whose name I don't know is Greg. And it's a little bit of a meme. Like I do that for the sake of humor, but it's also illustrative in that a good number of them probably are Greg. The really effective ones are. And the reason for that is he was doing a similar thing a decade earlier at the Wikimedia Foundation. And he was doing these for all kinds of weird geopolitical issues. So he'd be talking about little wars in third world countries, or here's what the World Economic Forum is up to, or here's why the UN is doing these things. He'd be modifying Wikipedia articles to fit some narrative for some reason, which has led to a lot of the accusations that he is, perhaps some kind of CIA or NSA spook. There is interesting evidence for that, but it's probably unprovable. But ultimately, he became one of the co-founders of Blockstream, one of the biggest voices in advocating for small blocks forever. Here's why all traffic needs to move to L2. By the way, we should be the ones that control these layer 2 networks and all these other things. And so Greg kind of became this meme for the Sybil attack, meaning that, if I posted, hey, Bitcoin should have an 8 megabyte block size limit, that there'd be 50 accounts that would show up and not only say you're wrong, but also you're a liar, you're probably funded by Coinbase or Barry Silbert or Roger Ver. You're probably you're just getting paid. You're a paid shill.
You like
you're a
Craig
scammer.
Wright. Use
Right.
report.
Exactly. Yeah. And some of them get, X-rated expletive about what
Yeah.
you're doing to Craig and, when the lights are out, like that kind of thing. And it shuttles the narrative away from the actual conversation about what Bitcoin is for and why we might care about it. And they're very, very successful at cutting out people who knew the history of Bitcoin, and people knew that Bitcoin was always supposed to scale on chain. It was supposed to do all the things that like Ethereum ever does, or Solana, or all these other things, all these chains that exist today. Everything should have been happening on Bitcoin. And today, almost none of it happens on BTC at all. And ultimately, it led to the splitting of first Bitcoin Cash and then ultimately Bitcoin SV, which all have varying skill sets in tokens, smart contracts, scalability, et cetera. BSV way out ahead on its ability to do all those extra interesting things. I argue that it is the only surviving implementation of the real Bitcoin, but that's hyper contentious, as you're well aware. And I think the audience should really look at it, study the Civil War, and make their own decision. Oop, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, I was
You're
on
muted.
mute there.
There you go. Okay.
All right, mature blockchain system requirements. Now, this is the Clarity Act, which
Yep.
is now passed inside of the House. All right, so we have the Genius Act and we've got the Clarity Act, and I want to ask you as basically as an expert. I mean, I would say I think you are pretty much a go-to guy on understanding what a mature blockchain is. So let's
Yep.
take a look at it as the law will likely define it here. So it's going to be under 15 USC 78A et sec under the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934. They go through some certifications and filing requirements, which is basically saying that, if you're a mature blockchain, make sure that you file with us certifications under penalty of perjury, the following information to let us know who you are. Now here's where it goes into the definition of basically considering deemed mature. In
Yep.
general, notwithstanding subdivision B, for the purpose of subdivision A, a digital commodity issuer, comma, digital commodity related person, digital commodity affiliated person, comma, or decentralized governance system of the blockchain system may establish that a blockchain system together with its related digital commodity is not controlled by any person or group of persons under common control if the blockchain system together is in related digital asset meets the requirements described in 2 or 3. So the main premise here, without boring people with the entire bill of what a mature blockchain system is, right there in that paragraph. And it talks about it must be not controlled by any person or any group of persons under common control if the blockchain system together is with its related digital asset. So my question for you is Bitcoin Core going to qualify for that?
I think, I mean, this is one of those things, like lawyers are really, really good at making a case one way or another, right? So if you put two really talented lawyers on this and told one side, hey, make sure BTC cannot pass versus make sure that BTC can pass no matter what, you're going to get two very compelling arguments as to why they should, or why their respective position is the right one. I would guess, just given the nature of how we've seen politically, how a lot of this stuff is shaken out, like who's in their pocket, like a lot of Congress people, the president himself has a BTC mining operation, now set up his own, I don't know what Trump organization or whatever, claims to have just bought $2 billion worth of BTC. I'm willing to bet that they're going to make sure that all kind of goes the way they want it to, no matter what. However, I would argue to the contrary. The reason I would argue to the contrary is I think it is very, very clear that there are less than 10 people in the entire BTC economy that decide everything that happens in the BTC economy. I think that most of the nodes are fake. They claim to be these independent, anonymous node operators, and I'd be willing to bet 85, 90% of them, maybe even more, are controlled by a very small group of people that are really good at doing social PR. If you look at the way the BIP editorial process works, meaning uh, when something is proposed, BIP is a Bitcoin improvement proposal. Um, this is essentially anybody can come to GitHub and write like, hey, I think Bitcoin should have this kind of new signature algorithm, and here's why, and here's the benefits, and here's the risks, and here's how we deploy it, and whatever. And they submit it to the BIP editor, and the BIP editor says, okay, should anybody else have the opportunity to read or debate this idea? So right there, that's gatekeeper number one. For many, many years, that was Luke Dash Jr. He was the solo guy from like 2012 until just the last 2 or 3 years. I believe now there are three BIP editors because I don't know, three people is sufficiently decentralized in their opinion now. But even so you got to get it past those three people for anybody else to even see what gets proposed to Bitcoin Core. And then ultimately, Bitcoin Core has, last I checked, it was 6 maintainers, meaning that 6 people ultimately get the final say as to what gets merged into Bitcoin Core, which is the de facto reference client. It's the reference client, but is the de facto, like that is Bitcoin as far as almost everybody's concerned. And for anybody that wants to debate me on that, if you look at the way that the Hong Kong agreement and the New York agreement went in 2016 and 2017 into 2018 during the whole fork wars, all of the mining companies, this was like 95% wanted to raise the block size limit. But the only way they could think to do it was to lobby Bitcoin Core. They're like, look, we don't want to mess with the code. We don't want to risk forking off the network. We have all this invested in hash power and all this other stuff, but we don't want to get on the bad side of Bitcoin Core because we all just run Bitcoin Core. We have no other desire but to run Bitcoin Core. So ultimately, it turned them into this group of priests essentially that you have to, show up and make a sacrifice and don't make eye contact and please Bitcoin Core, can we please have this new thing? And everything gets debated in the GitHub repo, and only after it's spent months or maybe years being debated in the Bitcoin Core repo does it even become a public concern. In which case, all of a sudden, all the Reddit forums and it used to be Bitcoin Talk was a huge spot to have these debates. I don't know that that's so big anymore. And then a lot of it spills its way onto X or X Twitter. And, and then right now they're having this debate about filtering the transaction. Should we run Bitcoin knots? Like everybody's, oh, it's a giant coup that Bitcoin knots has taken over, like, I don't know, 10% of all nodes on the network as they're big. And it's just a fork of Bitcoin Core in the first place with like a couple of little modifications. And they act like, oh, this is huge. These are these independent people now. But ultimately, if you look at that and if you were to explain all of this and show the evidence to lawmakers and say, hey, like look at ultimately, essentially, if this is going to be fine, I'm going to mention Greg Maxwell again. Show me one case in the last 10 years where the opinion of Greg Maxwell ended up losing in any debate in Bitcoin BTC since probably let's just say probably a little earlier. I bet from 2013 or 14 mostly until 2021, which is when the last major change, like Taproot and a bunch of this stuff happened. But since then, or in that period, which is the largest period of change in the history of Bitcoin, has Greg Maxwell's opinion ever lost? And I don't think it ever has. Now, I'm sure he could write a novel about all the little insignificant things that he has had to concede for whatever reason. But every big idea, every real debate has gone Greg's direction. Now, Greg is a co-founder of Blockstream. It's a company worth like $4 billion for some reason today. He's consulted in a bunch of places. He's closely associated with guys like Adam Back and Peter Todd, Luke Dash Jr., and a number of others who he's close friends and colleagues with. And ultimately, you could make the case that a guy like that has a huge inordinate amount of power in such a system because the system has these little proxies that look like they might be real, but really they're just puppets on a string. And there's a very small handful of real puppet masters in the system. And if you look at Ethereum, which is the number 2 blockchain, I would say that's even worse. I think it's crystal clear that the Ethereum Foundation is just a shell company for the opinion of Vitalik Buterin. And, especially going back to look at the split that happened in 2016 with the DAO hack. And the real Ethereum is Ethereum Classic. by all practical measures. And the fact that Vitalik just said, no, this one's Ethereum, like that was it. He just deemed it so. And like, are they going to take Ethereum down? Probably not, because it's too much money. There's just too much going on there. It's the same reason that Standard & Poor's didn't want to downgrade the credit of Lehman Brothers. They're like, oh, well, if we downgrade their credit publicly, they're going to collapse. We're going to collapse the economy. And it's like, that's your job. That is the sole purpose of Standard & Poor's. Like, you exist to make sure people understand credit risk. And they let it go too far, and they realized, quote unquote, too big to fail is a serious problem, but it's a problem of nepotism. And, and we're asking the biggest beneficiaries of nepotism, the US Congress, Washington, D.C. in general, to make decisions about how to regulate nepotism away from things. And it's like, no, we are, again, back to big tech, big banks, big government. They're all too closely correlated.
Well, I mean, your point's well taken if we go off of a historical significance, it will likely be that the nepotism will win. So if we go off history, however, my counter to that is that if there was true nepotism involved in this, then they would definitely stop this bill from passing. Because if it passes as it is, there are going to be legal challenges.
Sure.
There just will. And they could cut the legal challenges off at the top of the snake by just saying, you know what, exception here, BTC Core is an exception. Ethereum is an exception. Sure. They could easily plug that into this bill. And once it gets to the Senate, let's see what happens. But I'm going to keep a close eye on it. And I appreciate your insight. I want to ask you about the Satoshi coins, and then also the AI, the opportunity for entrepreneurs with AI. That's so huge. So if we could take a few minutes and give your perspective on the 80,000 BTC, and I guess there's another 15,000 BTC maybe. What's the status of these Satoshi-era coins?
So all of a sudden, about 6 weeks ago, old wallets started moving, real old stuff. 2010, 2011. Old mined coins, and it started to happen right around the same time that there were these weird, like, confiscation, not orders, but sort of the way that you used to be able to post in like a public newspaper and say, hey, we're going to claim this house if nobody else claims this house in 90 days or whatever. Common old practice. You'd get wealthy people that would look for houses that didn't have their grass getting cut regularly. So, hey, is this house abandoned? Maybe I can just pay the tax and title on it and take this house and flip it or whatever else, just add it to the real estate portfolio. And Salomon Brothers, which was an old sort of Wall Street firm that had disappeared about a decade ago, if I recall, all of a sudden there started being these, hey, these Bitcoins appear to be abandoned and our client would like to take possession. If they are yours, please contact Salomon Brothers. And they were sending dust transactions with these little op return strings in them with these, public, like, hey, we're going to take your stuff orders. So it was pretty weird situation. Turns out, I think it actually is Salomon Brothers has been spun back up and is doing exactly this thing, which is in itself very, very bizarre in my opinion. But and then these really old coins, like a bunch of the dusted addresses started moving, and moving them is an indication that, hey, these are not abandoned. It's literally like the person coming home, cutting their own grass and saying, get off my lawn. Like, you cannot just pay this is mine. And so that's weird. Now, a huge chunk of this BTC and BCH, if I recall, at least in some of the situations, started moving to Galaxy Digital, which is a huge firm, one of the oldest firms doing like big OTC work in the space, and liquidating huge amounts of BTC. Now, the curiosity here is that a number of these addresses had been listed in the Kleiman documents as property of one of the trusts associated to Craig Wright. There's multiple tulip trusts, and it's a whole onion that I would need some graphing and illustration to explain out in full. But ultimately, let's just say these are coins that are associated to Craig Wright via his trusts, according to documents submitted in the Kleiman case. And so that begs the question, like, is this Craig, or is this the Tulip Trust? Maybe it's the other trustees and not Craig. Maybe it's any number of things. Or, the other thing is maybe it's just random miners who are seeing this stuff and saying, okay, I guess it's time to move these things around. But the curious thing is that, like you said, tens of thousands of these coins did not just go into new addresses. They went to Galaxy Digital and they started selling. So that's it's a huge chunk of money to sell. I don't know who needs all that money at once, but making making those kind of decisions is very curious, especially after all these years. It kind of begs the question, like, okay, why move all of that money into fiat right now when it seems like, I almost can't think of a time in the last 15 years when fiat seemed like a worse place to be storing money, but maybe they're doing maybe they're buying precious metals, maybe they're buying real estate, maybe they're buying some other thing with all this money, but a lot of really weird stuff going on, lots of ways to speculate on who it is or why. But one of the most curious things in the last 24 hours that one of the addresses that some of these coins were sent to is a vanity address, and a vanity address is one and then in all caps CEB3RG is what I think those first several letters are, and in hacker lexicon nomenclature it says iceberg, which for anybody that recalls the history of Craig Wright talking about what he's going to do to Bitcoin, he made a public announcement given, I think at the time it was a year's notice or whatever, but he was giving.
So he said long-term legal notice.
Long-term notice, which is key when you're a key holder of a certain asset. And if you sell, you can crash the whole market. You have to give long-term notice so other investors can make their exit. Basically saying, hey, I may exit my multi-billion-dollar position. Prepare yourselves. Now, most people, I think at the time when he said this, Bitcoin Core was $3,000 and BSV was probably 100 or 200 bucks a coin. They were much more closely correlated. And people say, well, Craig's a liar and a scammer because now BTC is $115,000 and BSV is 30 bucks. And so he didn't have the coins. He wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have done it that way. So there's no way Craig would have done it that way. But the way he explained it was he actually wrote a whole article about rolling icebergs and the way to sell these things in and create this momentum that destroys BTC and makes BSV grow and all this other stuff. So it is an extreme curiosity that a vanity address starting in the word iceberg is the recipients of one of these coins, which is going to get all of our, all the tinfoil hat and antenna people are they're buzzing. And I'm very cautious about these things because on the one hand, there's a big part of me that instantly is like, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on too. But also, it's, I have to be very careful. I like to be that conservative guy to say, don't do anything crazy. I'll always make a conservative decision. Like speculate on it a little bit. Don't bet the house.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it is for sure like some of the most entertaining stuff ever in Bitcoin because
time.
While people called Craig crazy all this time, if that actually is happening right now, iceberg, how would that end up even on there? Is that just it was on there the whole time, or somebody knows how to change it? How is that possible?
So by chance, it's probably 1 in a trillion, maybe more. Maybe it's 1 in 100 trillion that you could just get that address. Now, the way that public and private keys work, if you just randomly generate public keys off of a private key, every time you add a letter that is a letter of significance, so could something come out as one Kurt, for example, for my vanity address? By chance, like each time you add a letter, like Kurt would be several orders of magnitude easier to generate by chance than Kurt Wuckert Jr., which would be infinitesimally close to impossible, right? But you can mine vanity addresses. So if you have an algorithm with your private keys and you tell it like, okay, I want you to mine me this address because I want to use this address, with sufficient hash power, you could mine something like iceberg probably inside of a day or two. It really depends how much hash power you have. If you have a very powerful machine, you can make a whole string that says like Kurt Wuckert Jr. is the bomb, and that could be my Bitcoin payment address. But you have to know what you're doing with it, and you have to be able to mine it. You have to be able to essentially find it in all of the variance and chance, because like I said, when you have private keys, you can generate near infinite public keys from it. And with near infinite possibilities, anything is possible. They exist out there. So there is a one Gavin Mehl address out there somewhere in the universe, but you have to find it. And finding it is basically a giant math problem. But if you have sufficient power, you can essentially brute force that address and then use it. So it seems it's near impossible that that address exists by chance, which means somebody did it very purposefully.
Somebody did it very purposely. They mined that address with a ton of hash power. Is basically
Yes.
the likely outcome. Somebody with a ton of hash power and a massive amount of knowledge on how to even do that. So
Yeah.
this was no accident. All
Yeah.
right, so man, I mean, really exciting stuff, dude. What about the? I mean, I just have to like theorize here a little bit before we go into the AI stuff. I want to ask you, and that's why the heck aren't they selling the BSV? And what is the market cap of the BSV? Because if this guy is selling, what is it, 80,000, maybe not 100,000 BTC, isn't that
80,000.
like almost $10 billion? And so with $10
It's
billion,
yeah,
dollars,
it's a huge chunk of money.
he's not selling the BSV. BSV is so small. I mean, is that right? He's just leaving it there?
So far,
What would the
now
effect if he just said, you know what, let me put 10% of this into BSV? What would the effect of that be? I mean, I don't know if is that part of the realm of possibility of the rolling iceberg?
I mean, that was the way the rolling iceberg conversation was had. That hey, if you time things right in how you sell the BTC into BSV, you can flip their market caps and whatever. I don't. It's This is like 5 years ago or more now, so I don't remember exactly what the details are on that conversation. But yeah, it's designed to do that, and it's designed to also, if I remember, and I might be mixing two things up. It might be correlated to closeness to a halvening, making it that hashing is very unprofitable directly after a halvening. And so if it's very unprofitable and you can push the price down at the same time, you can kind of create like this death spiral where difficulty becomes too high to mine another block, which then forces a coordinated hard fork in order to fix the difficulty algorithm to get a new block on BTC. And so it's a way, well, it does two things. It shows that under pressure, a small group of people, oh, here's my magic thumbs up, that a small group of people can change Bitcoin, right? And that's part of the attack is to undermine that sort of it's immutable, nobody's in charge. You just got to show them. You have to say, okay, like, if your head is being held underwater and you're going to drown if you don't tap out and say, okay, I can change it. Like that's a little bit the conversation that's happening there. So, um, it
So it sounds like there's an article from five or so years ago. Maybe it could have been part of the long-term legal notice article where it talked about the potential strategy. And I'm only giving it a little bit of weight now because of this realm of impossible situation with the iceberg showing up on the blockchain. I
yeah,
mean, I mean, if that didn't just happen, I guess we'd say, okay, it was just playing games again. But or maybe,
yeah,
but
that silly
now
guy.
it's like
Yeah.
this is starting to potentially make sense. So for people who want to research it, it sounds like that could be on the internet somewhere about the possibilities of it. I
Yep.
mean, and could it cause a flip, like a hyper Bitcoinization? Is that what it's called, a hyper Bitcoinization moment, or what is it? What is it
It,
exactly?
I think people would probably call it the flippening. I would save hyper Bitcoinization for an event where, I don't know, something like more than half of all people are doing a Bitcoin transaction per day or something like that. But it's hyper Bitcoinization to me is that like rapid onset of real world use of the technology. But I mean, it would be news. It would be the news of the week for sure if such a flippening event were to happen. So I'm here for it.
Yeah. All right. So now let's talk about the AI convergence with Bitcoin. And there's a guy out there. I'll plug it at the end of the video, but I'll plug it here at the end. He wrote an article, and his name is Immoral. Anyways, if there's AI Alignment Group, there's an article called AI-2027.com. Let me
Mhm.
share my screen just so people can see it. I don't know. Let's see if I could plug it at the end. There's this article, which is extremely complex, that talks
Mhm.
about AI, and the Industrial Revolution. And then there's this video going into it. We're not ready for superintelligence. There's also this AI alignment group, which is a part of these things. And then there's another thing, another video, which I can't find right now. But anyways, he talked about how the AI is is in a situation where we should be concerned. We should be very concerned as humanity for our for our children over the next 5 years or even less, if there aren't some sort of controls put in place on the AI for what it's doing. And the argument was, well, we have to line it in by creating a blockchain or a decentralized ledger. And the theory was, well, it's too bad that Bitcoin got hijacked, because had it not been hijacked, it would have been the perfect situation. It would
Yeah.
have been perfect for this. And so they're trying to build maybe a new blockchain or something else that might work better, than BTC. So I guess my question to you is like, what could, for entrepreneurs, like if you're an entrepreneur, I'm seeing this as a massive opportunity right now for
Mhm.
like the blending of the two. So
Yeah.
can you theorize of maybe possible ideas for what entrepreneurs could do by blending these two?
So I recently wrote an article. I think it's titled "You're Not Bullish Enough on AI." It's something like that, anyways. And I'm basically explain. I actually kind of go into all of those things that you mentioned in at a very high level. It's not deep. It's certainly normal person readable content. But I talk about how I don't think it's dangerous in the sense that people think, Skynet or HAL 9000 or any number of, the Matrix, any of this kind of stuff. Those are fun stories, but they just don't actually make any sense. And the reason they don't make sense is they're based on Cold War fears about how people how people used to be controlled in like a pre-World War II paradigm, which was, people used to actually come in and burn down your village and kill all the people that you loved. And they just largely don't do that anymore. It still happens in smaller circumstances, but in the Western Hemisphere, they've come to realize that it makes a lot more sense to uh, lightly enslave people. You want to keep people embroiled in the tech with w- basically you're in a giant cage instead of a little cage. So you don't realize you're in a prison cell, because if you know you're in a prison cell, then you start to fight the prison. But if you have like this big free range, most people think they're free and they're just like, we're fine. And and then they go on and pay their taxes and get monitored by Facebook and whatever else. So I wrote this article about how AI is going to do the same thing. It's not going to try to kill you or put you in like a meat factory. That they're going to engage with you the same way that like your Silicon Valley types do, and say, hey, use this free tool. This free tool is going to make your life really good. And you're going to get passively addicted to it, but it's good because you love this new tool. It'll imprison you the way that TikTok imprisons you, or pornography or coffee or nicotine. Like they get you stuck in these things where like, I just need another cup of coffee, which is actually part of the reason why I used espresso cups in all of my illustrations in this article, is that it's that soft addiction that is the better prison. And so the real risk of autonomous AI is that it'll become so good at like consumerist capitalism that you won't even know that you're being enslaved to the system. But I also think that is way off in the future, and I think it's a very low probability of happening anyways. The real opportunity, the way that these machines work, an LLM or an AI, is that they essentially are just really fast at guessing the best next word in a response to things. And this is why it hallucinates weird answers to people sometimes. Is sometimes it just does a bad job. And when it does a bad job, you don't necessarily know, because it's good at making itself sound authoritative. But really, and this is why this agentic, I noticed agents being mentioned in a couple of the articles that you share, and I mentioned it in mine too, is that so what you want are multiple machines that are essentially negotiating with each other at the same time. And so machine one says, I think this next business process should look like this. And then machine two says, that's not how I would parse it. And then machine three might be the tiebreaker, and the machine four makes sure that all of it is quality assured. And the machine five actually proposes the answer to the person, or maybe it directly publishes or whatever it's doing. And with agents, it allows there to be a little bit more of a quorum or a committee involved in coming up with good decisions. And so this is kind of like the difference between having one person in your marketing department or four people in your marketing department. For a big company, let's say like Disney or McDonald's or something, they're going to have a few people say, okay, should we post a tweet, or should we do like what should our actual conversation as a brand look like? And that's a negotiation, that's a discussion, that's our internal marketing team with an external ad agency and all these other things. And so AI agents can do the work of 100 people over the course of a year and condense that down to something like 3 minutes, where you come up with what's called a project requirements document. So essentially, you're the head of marketing, right? Let's just say you're the head of marketing for a giant brand, and you say, okay, here's our brand's colors, and here's our brand ethos, and here's the company motto, and here's the way that we want kids to see us, and here's the way we want to be perceived by Christian conservatives, and here's the way we want to be perceived by blue-haired liberals, and here's like all these things. So you put all of these things into a document and say, okay, what we really want to do is sell more widgets, whatever it takes. Now, give me a strategy that is ads, direct sales, content marketing, blogging, influencer posts, like all these other things. Write this all out for me. Well, the agents are going to kind of take that over, and they'll start to parse it down. And one of them will say, okay, I'm ads. The other one says, okay, I'm marketing. And okay, I'm direct sales. And okay, I'm all these other things. And then it can continue to break these things out and outsource this the way that a big company would. A company, the size of Pfizer or somebody would have hundreds of people in this funnel that are making all these things happen. But each one of those quote unquote people can just be a different machine that has these different optimized skill sets. And it can ultimately filter all this out and start to execute on it in an automated fashion. And all you really need is to understand how to control the dashboard. How do you control the whole of it? Essentially, how do you be the CEO of a 100-person company, but each person is a machine? That's the paradigm shift. And with that, it allows every single pajama pants wearing stay-at-home entrepreneur that has a basic understanding of computer tech, it allows each of them to have the power of a massive corporate CEO, but without any of the overhead, or with like a infinitesimal fraction of the overhead. That's the opportunity. So this opportunity, this is why I say we're not bullish enough on AI, is that we've essentially taken the population of the world, the productive population of the world, which is probably 5 billion people, and we've just made that exponential. We've made it that each one of those people can go 100x or 1,000x if they can just acquire the skill set to deploy it. So what's 1,000 times a billion? So we're talking about the productivity of 50 trillion people on the earth. Like, it is possible to get to that over the next 2 or 3 years. Now, it would take I didn't even know 100 million years to give birth to that many people, not to mention the resources of the planet couldn't sustain it. But now you have the ability to create these people out of the ether, create them out of essentially nothing, out of code, and you store them in your system, and they don't need time off. They don't need a lunch break. They're not going to go have an affair in the fax closet or whatever the hell. Like, you don't have to deal with any of that HR nonsense or whatever. And so it allows you to scale up. And so to the people that say like, oh man, AI is either going to kill us or enslave us, or it's going to make a bunch of people unemployed, or like, no, it is going to create so much economic growth over the next, I really think within 3 to 5 years, we're going to just see a massive Why is it giving me a thumbs down now? Come on, AI. So
the AIs didn't like that.
Right. Shut up, Kurt. Stop telling them. So, but I really think it's going to, like, we're going to see productivity hockey stick like we've never seen it before. And with productivity, I mean, it's wealth. We're talking about this huge opportunity for wealth creation.
Yeah. No,
It's just massive.
you couldn't be, you nailed it right there. It's going into an age of abundance that we've never seen before. That all it takes is a tiny little skill set. I saw this interview, the podcast of this guy, who's doing this AI massive AI forum business that Daniel Street had sent me, and that was like he said he quit. He's a CPA. He's been an accountant for 20 years. He quit. He gave it up. He threw in the towel. He's like, I don't need to be a CPA anymore. I'm done. In his opinion, he's like, that business is over. I've been replaced by AIs. I need to master this. And now
Yep.
he's mastering how to maneuver in this new world, and his whole business model is completely changed.
Yep.
The whole boomer world for him was gone. He's like, I had to quit. I stopped. There's no point.
Yeah.
They don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
So it's just about like making that change and realizing that, hey, you've got to adapt. But by adapting, it becomes a world of abundance. So is
Yes.
there a way that Bitcoin can be the one, or is it the only one? And maybe this is how Teranode can come in, because I've seen some things about Teranode really making progress or maybe being released. And so can you tell us something about Teranode with what's up with that?
I realized I didn't answer your basic question about the AI, which was
Yeah.
how can how can Bitcoin help make it secure and safe and this kind of thing. I think the obvious one is data purification. What we don't want is for AI to be accessing databases where it doesn't understand context. So you might find I always make the case like, hey, if you ask it a question about culture and it decides to use a subreddit that is based on LGBTQ people who are really into like vampire fantasy, but they're all really, really painfully sarcastic and they've been around for 10 years, then they have this subculture that is so deeply ingrained that they don't have to explain the joke anymore to each other. And the AI cannot parse that is not reality. And so if it's fed on data from this bizarre niche subculture, then it might start to tell you like, well, if you ever wanted to make out with a vampire over here, it's been said 10,000 times over the last 10 years that here's the steps to do it. It might treat that as reality. Well, that's a huge problem if you're trying to have it come up with something serious. And so what we need are basically for the same reason that triple entry accounting matters, in that you have a third party that can just attest to the data outside of two parties that might have a conflict of interest. The third party doesn't. The third party doesn't care. It just does its job. If you have a distributed database that can take tons and tons of information, which is really all an AI is just brute forcing tons and tons of information, and you put hash marks in it, like essentially hashing the data and saying this is real data, like this is actually from the Swiss Institute of Technology Standards or whatever, then you can start to say, okay, here's real data, real science, real white papers. This is really from Harvard or MIT or Yale or Stanford, or this is really from the National Institute of whatever, or it's really from Merck or
No,
Pfizer or
yeah,
Glaxo
this is a
or
big
whatever,
problem
right?
with the legal industry, because is this a real published case, or is this a post on Reddit like about this case?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
that is actually, now you're making sense to me, where we could.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's a huge one. Just having publicly verified data for when you need to have a serious conversation, especially in those niches. Imagine your doctor. You don't just want your doctor to go on Chat GPT to diagnose you. You want the doctor to be using sterile information the same way he wears sterile gloves. You want him to have sterile data that he is accessing about the breadth of all medical possibility. And and maybe even given the option to like, hey, what does Reddit, the biohacker subreddit or whatever, say about this thing if somebody's got a really weird offhandle issue. But ultimately you want to start at validated, verified, proof of work secured, distributed data. And that's really, really important. So that's one key one. Now, why is that difficult? Well, because public blockchains don't scale. At least they have not to date. Even BSV as it stands, probably capable of 10,000 transactions per second globally. But that's not enough when you need to sort every single piece of global data. You need to be talking about millions, perhaps even billions of transactions per second to start to just ingest all of that data into such a database. And that's where Teranode comes in. You need something that can be doing terabyte blocks every 10 minutes and validating tons and tons of data in real time, keeping it properly sorted, making sure that it's written to the database correctly, and all these things. And that's the real science breakthrough. Those are the things that we've been working on in the BSV economy for 6-7 years now, and we are like right there. We're right on the cusp of release. Gorilla Pool is running the latest alpha release of it. Seems stable. Everything's working really well. A lot of nice features. I think release is imminent. They're not going to give me a heads up. I certainly won't be the guy to say, be doing the, hey, it's happening tomorrow or anything like that. But we really could wake up any day with the, hey, here's the public release of Teranode, or hey, like the blocks are being mined exclusively with Teranode at Gorilla Pool or something like that. But we're very close. It's
What will
it's a big change.
Visual effect of that be? Will the transactions per day change chart, or what will people see that are just looking? How will we know?
I mean, the technology in and of itself is not going to create the demand overnight. So it's a little bit like building a 10-lane highway from LA to San Francisco, for example, is like, well, I mean, people would drive on it today. You guys could use another highway, I'm sure, but starting in the 1950s, it might have seemed a little bit like, are this many people ever going to move to California, right? So it'll be a little bit like that. You're building the infrastructure, the plumbing, the roads, all the stuff for the city that you think people will live in over the next 100 years, right? And the fact that it's there then allows some of these institutions to start to say, hey, that really interesting blockchain idea we had 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and no blockchain could help us do it. There's a blockchain that can do that now. And I imagine there are a lot of those kind of projects where somebody had a novel idea and went to Ethereum or something and said, oh, okay, well, my idea doesn't work. Like I thought blockchains worked. They don't. So my idea is going on the shelf. And then when this comes out with like, hey, blockchains do work, I think we'll have that woodwork era where people show up with their big idea that they tried in private, and now I think they'll be willing to try it in public, really test out like, okay, is this Teranode thing the real deal? And when it is, I mean, that's it, man. That's our miracle moment.
Sounds like this is a special time in history. I mean, really an exciting time in history right now to be a part of, and it's funny for the people who watch the price. I looked; it was $28 for BSV and 116,000 for BTC. So sounds like there's something. That's a world of insane opposites here right now. I guess in the way of value, but that's. I think that's a wrap, man. I really appreciate all the insight, the history stuff. I mean, we went into Teranode, we went into the Satoshi-era coins, and even the AI convergence. So, where can people find you? And I know that you got your Tuesday show every Tuesday at 11, 2 Eastern, right? So. Yep. And anything else that people should look you up on, or anything else that we should look forward to?
I mean, that's it, man. I'm Kurt Wuckert Jr. everywhere. Check out gorillapool.com. Check out the new bitcoinschema.org. We've recently updated. So we're updating a bunch of the tooling for the Teranode era, just making sure everything's kind of going to work with all the new stuff. And we're really pumped. But we want people to be use our Jungle Bus tool set. If you want to build things, look at Jungle Bus, onesatordinals.com, and bitcoinschema.org. Really think about your stack and why you should be using these data tools. Look at the new tooling that just came out today, actually from BSVA. It explains how to utilize the Teranode P2P network to create overlay networks and all these other things. So start educating yourself on that. If you're a blockchain builder, a blockchain entrepreneur, really start to familiarize yourself. Like this is that 1 or 2 quarters where stuff is going to start rolling out. And if you're not ready for it when it's all the way out, somebody else might be ready for you and leapfrog you. So all that stuff, follow me on X, send me a DM. And if anybody else watching would like to have me as a guest, I'm currently soliciting new guest appearances. I'd love to hop on and be interviewed by others too.
Nice. Right on, Kurt. Well, thank you, my man. Really appreciate it. We'll see you at the top next time.